Hello, welcome everybody to our webinar today. My name is Josh Wachtel. I'm the communications specialist for the IRP Graduate School, and I'm so happy to be here with you. And I'm so happy to be here with my guest today, who will be joining us in just a moment. I want to say, I see people are already chatting where they're from. That's great. And make sure you chat, select the drop from the drop down, chat to everyone. Otherwise, it's just going to go to the hosts and panelists. Let us know your title and where you're coming from. It's just great, as always, to see folks from all over: Waterford, Michigan, Massachusetts. I'm in Western Massachusetts, Lewiston, Maine, Jersey City, Yonkers, New York, Barrie, Ontario, Canada, Ottawa, Canada, South Bend, New York, Dublin, Ireland, Kingston, Jamaica. Oh, they're coming too fast now. All right, so go into the chat and have a look. It's so exciting to have 175 people so far from all over the world joining us today for this really, really exciting discussion. The title of today's webinar is Creative Restorative Practices in the Classroom, and we are joined by three really great educators that I'm so happy to present to you: Rosie Arcona, Kim Jones, and Lisa Cofield. I just want to take care of a few housekeeping things while we're joining. We are going to rely on your participation today to help drive the discussion. So when you have questions that you would like to direct to the panelists, please use the Q&A box. It's at the bottom of your screen, Q&A, and you can type questions in there. We'll be drawing on those questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can, and sometimes I'll look at the questions and bring a few together to ask the guests, but we'll try to get to as many of those so you can get the questions answered that you're most interested in. In the chat, feel free to use that area to have conversations if you would like, and share any resources that you have. That's a really nice space for people to share those kinds of things. At this time, I am going to open our poll. Please just take a moment. It should be popping up on your screen, and let us know what role or roles you play in your educational setting. So just can give us a little bit of a reading of the room. We'll hopefully be addressing questions that will be relevant to all of you, that you can get some ideas to take back to your workplace. All right, so I'm just going to let that run for a minute. The structure of the webinar is we're going to begin in just a moment or two. I'm going to bring the guests on, and we're going to have a short round robin. Each of them are going to speak for about 3 to 5 minutes about some ways that they're using restorative practices creatively in their environments. And I'm so happy we have all levels of K-12 represented: elementary school, middle school, and high school, from our panelists today. So hopefully, they will be able to address a lot of what you're interested in. And then after that period, the rest of the time will be Q&A and discussion. So that'll be, probably a little before the second half. We'll break into that until right up into the hour. So let's see. It looks like most people have answered our poll. We have couple people still weighing in. 185 people have answered. It looks like, let's see, a lot of administrators, consultants, and school counselors seem to be winning the day today. And I guess I can understand. I'm sure a lot of the teachers at elementary and secondary education are in the classroom right now, but we did get a lot of people signing up, and this will be recorded. We will send out the recording. So even if you have somebody who missed it today and you want to share it with them, or you'd like to watch some of those portions, we will be sharing that recording. It will be on our website for quite some time. We'll be leaving it up there, but if you registered for this event, you will get a link to that recording. All right. So I think I've covered all of that. So at this time, I'd like to invite our panelists to turn their videos on and join me on the Zoom screen. Okay, let me make sure I've got this. All right, great. And I gotta show myself now. All right, there we go. Um, welcome again. And I'm going to begin with Rosie Arcona. Rosie has been an educator in the Sacramento City Unified School District for 24 years. She's alternated between serving as a K-6 classroom teacher and a training specialist, along with a multiple subject teaching credential. She holds a bachelor's in human development and a master in restorative practices from the IIRP Graduate School. Rosie, in her current role, is an social emotional learning training specialist. She supports schools in developing a positive school culture and climate through the integration of SEL and restorative practices. Rosie, please unmute yourself and please, yeah, just let us know a little bit about the ways you've been using restorative practices creatively in your environment.
Thank you, Josh. I just want to say first off that it was really heartwarming to be invited to join you all. And I'm really excited to learn with and from each of you today. Most of my time has been spent supporting schools with restorative practices. And so I'd like to offer 2 restorative classroom strategies, which I've refined over the years, and I'm sure you all could refine even more. So the first one is the use of daily emotion check-in circles. I feel like that should be like an acronym. In which I use a sequential go around to support students' belonging and connectedness to one another, of course, but also to help them develop SEL skills, and specifically their ability to become more aware of and identify their emotions as a first step to managing them. Because I'm always reminded of Dr. Dan Siegel. He says, if you can name it, you can tame it. And in our peace speak, when we express our affects, especially negative ones, we lessen their intensity. It's really important for me that we make that connection between affective language and SEL. And because the more varied and specific our own adult emotional vocabulary, then it helps our students to be specific and varied in their emotional vocabulary, because then we can, both students and adults, use effective affective statements. So for this emotion check-in circle, I'd use a feeling faces or emotion chart, or a list of emotion words. And then I offer sentence frames. And I think that's important, especially in our district. We found that in a climate survey, our students are feeling challenged to identify their emotion. And if they can't identify it, then it's harder to know what to do to manage them. Secondly, along those lines of kind of that emotion identification and emotion management, I offer establishing a restorative calming space in the classroom. And some of you may already be familiar with time away versus a timeout, or a calming corner. It's a place for students to go to, and they request to go to it when they feel dysregulated. And there they can use mindfulness strategies. And then for my calming corner, which was a beach in my classroom, they would complete a restorative reflection card or sheet, and it has restorative questions on it. And in doing so, they are, calming down, lessening those negative affects. And they also turn that into me before they, after a few minutes of being in the calming corner, they turn it in on my desk in a box, and then they trust that I'm going to facilitate a harm to peace circle between them and their peers who have they been in conflict with, or perhaps in drama with again, right? So again, they can refocus on learning because they trust that I'm going to help them have this time in later to help solve their problems. And then eventually my students would run harm circles themselves, and then I could just sit back and watch from a distance while I finish eating my lunch.
All right. Thank you so much, Rosie. And I see we already have a question in the Q&A about SEL, and I was hoping that those questions would start coming in, and I expected that there would be some more questions about SEL because, we're just seeing more and more how social emotional learning and restorative practices really fit hand in glove. So at this point, I would like to turn to Kim Jones to introduce some of the things she's doing. Kim graduated from Illinois State University with a bachelor's degree and went to work in early childhood education. She worked her way up from classroom teacher to the director of the center. She then worked in an alternative school in Bloomington, Illinois, where she worked with junior and high school students for 4 years. Her journey then took her to Peoria Public Schools, where she's been a classroom teacher for the past 8 years, teaching 7th grade English language arts. Currently, she's completing her principal internship to earn her master's degree in P12 educational leadership. Kim, can you please tell us some of the ways you've been using your circles creatively with building relationships and curriculum this year?
Absolutely. So I was a little slower to dive right in. So really, my explicit journey began when we went virtual. I had done circles and, had some success, but still was just trying to make that more part of our everyday routine. Once we went into that virtual world, I needed a way to be able to connect with those students. So finding success with that, when we came back, we did hybrid at first, and then we did come back as full groups at the end of last year, and circles really helped that. So just to have that background as to how I was going to start my year this year, having everybody back in school. My classroom is cramped. We have the old school desks and not a lot of space. So after researching and talking to other restorative practitioners, decided that standing circles was the way to go. And I have been thrilled. If there is a day that the schedule, like we had NWA testing and the kids were, even when we got done testing, saying, oh, aren't we going to be able to do our circles today? So the buy-in from them and the fact that they're requesting and wanting to do circles, it gives me that validation even more so. The creative ways that I bring curriculum into it is being an English language arts teacher. We have, different vocabulary words that we're focused on with our stories, or different topics that we're discussing. So I make those part of our circle questions. The check-in usually is something to, how are they feeling that day? Something of that nature. I usually do those as sequential so that everybody, has the opportunity, at least that talking piece is coming to them, so that they have to say they're going to pass, or at least verbalize in some way. And most of them dive right in and do that. One of the examples I had as far as bringing that curriculum in, mesmerize was one of our vocabulary words. So I had them discuss in a non-sequential circle what mesmerizes them. So we first had to discuss, what does mesmerize mean? Do we remember what, from the story? And so then it was able to transition right into back into the story we were reading. Okay, now we know what mesmerizes us. How do we apply that with the character in the story and what was mesmerizing them? So I just find as many ways to creatively bring that curriculum piece into it. I also utilize circles for SEL components like Rosie talked about. Again, I'm with middle school, but it works just the same way. Being able to bring up all those important topics. We focused on anger and happiness and, comparing and contrasting. What are some of our triggers? What are some ways that we can work through it? What do we do when we're feeling frustrated? And then bringing in those restorative questions as well. Like Rosie had talked about too, if students, we have like a safe seat in our classroom where if a student isn't being successful in their space, they just need a little bit of a break. So it is, essentially the same as a timeout. But my reflection sheets that they're filling out when they're being moved has the restorative questions. What happened? What were you thinking? who all is involved. And then what do you feel needs to, happen to make it right? Or what changes do we need? And then I, try to find that time just to be able to chat with them about those. So, and then of course, if tough topics come up, and we've had many challenges this year that we've been able to utilize circles for, because that structure was already set up and the students know the expectations of that circle. It's so much easier to be able to talk about those tough things. The students, when we were creating our expectations, which we did in the circle, we created our norms and our expectations for the classroom. And so then it's, an excellent space that they know that it is a safe space, that we do have that trust with one another. And yeah.
Wonderful. That's a great introduction. I'm noticing a theme of spaces that students can use for working through things, and it's nice to hear of these non-punitive spaces. And I know Lisa may have an example of that, although you can hold that for later too. So let me introduce Lisa at this point. Lisa Cofield has more than 20 years of experience in youth development and education programs. She began her career working with troubled and at-risk youth in alternative education. She is currently the coordinator, most people would know that as a principal, at Bucksmont Academy Woodland Center. This is an IRP model program. At Bucksmont Academy, she's implemented the essential elements of the IRP Safer, Saner Schools program, utilizing restorative practices to achieve high participation and build relationships with students, staff, and parents. Under her leadership, troubled and at-risk youth are given the opportunity to grow, to improve their emotional, social, and coping skills while also enhancing their academic performance. And she also earned a Master of Restorative Practices in Youth Counseling at the IRP Graduate School and a Master of Education at Lincoln University. So Lisa, please unmute yourself and let us know a little bit about how you started the year. I know it was a little different this year, but I think people would really be interested in how that works in a small program such as the one you're working with.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for having me here, and hello, everyone. This year, as you know, was unique due to the pandemic. So we all, as educators, had to find some unique way of how to have a healthy classroom. So for me, I was very challenged because coming to the school year, I had students who were virtual for a year and a half. I was challenged with new students coming to our program, and I had returning students who were in person last year. So having this combination, I had to really think out the box and say, how can I have a restorative school? How can I have a restorative environment? And what's important to have a restorative environment is to have healthy relationships. If you have healthy relationships, you can have a restorative environment, you can have a restorative classroom, you can have a restorative school. So what I decided to do for the first 3 days of school, we did team builders, strictly fun, trusting activities where the students were able to get to know each other. Staff know the students, students know the staff, where the peers can begin to build peer relationships. So for 3 days, it was wonderful just watching them play different games such as Team Pictionary, softball, basketball. They did some go around questions, some icebreakers, Team Pictionary. They did some interpersonal interactions, which they really liked doing. They wanted to ask those questions. They created games, they made up games. One game was called Bucket Basketball. I mean, they were just creative, just doing things, building relationships. But what was also important too is that we allowed the students to use their voice. So they were able to choose what activities they wanted to do to build relationships. It was very noticeable how they were building relationships with the laughing, the talking. The new students were able to buy into the program. It was really something beautiful to see. After the 3 days of the team builders, we went in our 4th day where we started norming and structuring the school. So the norming is when the students and staff come together and they just set norms and expectations of what the school year will look like. What do we want our community to look like? What norms are going to guide their behaviors and in the various settings, such as the lunchroom, when they have lunch, when they are on the bus traveling, when they're in the classroom, their groups. You want to have these norms put in place so everybody could be held accountable and responsible, but most importantly, safe. Even activities, what they're going to do outside on the school property. And when they brainstorm, they collect all their ideas and they brainstorm and they elaborate on what it is and what it means to be restorative in the community. So some of the norms that the students had came up with was follow directions, be respectful, do not talk when someone else is talking. And one of our favorite ones is be nice, just as simple, be nice. So when they make the norms and they all collectively come together and agree in the collaboration of what norms they're going to use for the community, they were implemented, and then we go into our school lessons where the students attend classes for their subjects.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. Actually, I want to ask you a follow-up question on that.
Okay.
What difference does it make? I mean, those rules sound like rules that any school would have. Why is it important for the students to come up with those norms?
This is their school. This is their safe place. This is their environment. This is their community. And it's so important for them to use their voice to express what they want their community to look like. What do they want their educational setting to look like and how it should be.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we're already getting some great questions in the Q&A. I just want to remind you, if you have questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A. We might miss them in the chat. I do see there's a couple questions in the chat, but if you want to restate them or make sure they're being asked in the Q&A, so we can make sure we get those questions asked. So we're going to take the rest of the time for discussion and for those questions. So I'm going to invite Rosie and Kim also to go ahead and unmute, and Lisa unmute, and really just feel free to talk with each other, ask each other questions as well as we go along. So I think let's see. I want to ask folks to talk about the physical classroom is a question that's coming up, and like teachers saying, do we have to put the chairs in a circle? What do you guys have to say about that? What's your feeling about the structure, and how do you do that? I don't know, Rosie, do you want to kick that off?
Sure. It does take time, because so yesterday I was in a classroom modeling a circle with 6th graders, and there were 7 rows of, I think, 5 students each. It's tight. Everyone has a mask on, and so we have to be mindful of those mitigation protocols. But they, with some incentive with points and what they call sore bucks, they in 30 seconds got all the desks moved to the periphery of and they just had their chairs in a circle, and they did it just as fast, putting back. I was like counting down 30 seconds, and I turned around and the class was already like back to where it was at the beginning. But it does take some time. So maybe the first circle is how to get in and out of the circle. And there is some pre-planning involved. So because I had to, with the teacher, think about, so it's not a big mess and everyone does it all at once, which rows would go to the walls first, and then the middle ones would go next. And it's kind of like, row by row and chair by chair, they got into the circle. I think it's important to be in a circle because you can see each other, and the connectedness, our oxytocin, our bonding hormone, produces more when we see each other's faces. That emotional bonding really happens then. And teachers need to sit in the circle too, to show that they are a participant, and being on the same level, whether it's a standing circle or a sitting circle. Sitting down with them says, I'm a facilitator, but I'm also a member of the community, and I get equal voice just like you all. And I'll even raise my hand when it's a non-sequential go around to say, I want you to call on me. You can feel free to call on me or not. I can wait my turn. I hope that answered the physical structure of the circles.
I think that was fantastic, Rosie. And then, like I had said, I'm more focused on the standing circle. If I know that we have something either that's maybe a little bit more intense, I will go ahead and structure the classroom up that way. Otherwise, to save time and knowing that I either need the students in groups that day or in rows, but now I love, and I'm going to take those tips for me as far as practicing moving the chairs too. That's why I have them be standing. Also, because we're transitioning from group to group or, across the hallway, the kids have been sitting for a long time. That's why I also choose intentionally to do standing circles. Let's stand up. Let's get that blood flow. I do incorporate brain breaks, which are having them stand up and move around too. So having the circle and that they know they're going to come in, I'm going to go over what our agenda is. And then I say, okay, let's get in a circle. And I have, even as far as where they're standing, since the desks are either in groups or in rows, they know where they're going to go, where their space is for the circle as well. And definitely making myself part of that. And I do, when it's non-sequential, raise my hand as well and stress that importance with them. Like I said, I use it more for them to be able to physically stand up. The other part of the question, I do use talking pieces sometimes when they're in their seats. But again, that is the challenge of students not being able to see one another. And that connection that you make, I did a circle with the students about why are circles important. 2 weeks into it, I said, okay, let's talk about circles. I want your guys' feedback, your opinions. And they were telling me all these amazing things about the value of it. And they brought up, you can see one another's face. Mm-hmm. We can actually, it is our space to speak our truth. We trust one another while we're going around. And I was elated that they were able to bring the language right back to me. So that's, my take on it too.
And ladies, I agree with both of you. You made some valid points. The circle is so important because number one, it brings that connection. When you have a circle, there's connection. There's not like a beginning or end, you're threaded. And it brings that intimacy. And it also helps in the time of discussion or whatever the circle is used for, whether it's proactive or reactive, you are in the moment, you're present. It calls for you to be attentive. And it gives you that good eye contact along with the body language. You can read people's body language along with their words and you can say, hey, that's not lining up. But then also you can read it and say, wow, this is very encouraging and very supportive. I just like how the circles bring unity. It brings that unity. And as you said, Kim, yes, it's a safe place. This is a place where we can bring our issue, we can trust each other and be honest and see how we feel and say what you mean and mean what you say. So the circle gives you that eye contact, connection. It lets you be in the present. You're in that now moment and your voice is heard.
There's some great chat going on. We have so many experts who are attending this, all of you out there who are doing this work every day. Thank you for that great discussion that's happening. How often circles? Once a day, once a week, all day long? What do you have to say? I know there's so many contours to this question. Who wants to take it?
I'll take it. Circles they're every day, at least I'll say 4 times a day. We have a morning circle. There's circles in the classroom. There's circles when we have an idea of suggestion of what we want to do for the day for the gym activity. I mean, that's a norm for us to have circles and to talk, to collaborate and to share. So mostly the time we use the circles is just to keep that accountability in the community, as well as with the norms, encouraging one another, supporting one another, just again, keeping that connection. So the circles are used often because they're utilized to keep the connection in the community.
That's right. So, that's part of the fabric of your program. What's this look like at a public school, elementary school, middle school? What do you say about that? Kim.
I will jump in quick. So again, I'm public middle school. So I start, like I said, I will go over the agenda items, like let the kids get their stuff settled in their desks. And then with the standing circles, it's, okay, it's time for us to circle up. So I start my class. I have 3 sections of 7th grade this year. So we start each class with our circle. But again, like I said, if I'm using it for content to introduce what we're doing, review what we've done, or maybe it's just something that is kind of bizarre that I've run across that we want to discuss. And then like if there has been any issues, because I don't have solid blocks for everybody, some of them are broken up. So if there's been an issue after lunch and, maybe we had challenges in the hallway, I'll change or we'll add a second circle into that time that I have with those students so that we can do more of that responsive time instead of most of my circles are proactive. I do like to, stick to more than that 80%. Most of the time inside of the classrooms, we don't have challenges or struggles, but those transition times are extremely challenging for our junior high still. So like I said, if something comes up, then I will add in circles as needed. And what I love even more is students are starting to request them. I had this conflict. Can we talk about it in a circle? And I absolutely, if you're having this issue, I'm sure it's not just you. Let's discuss it.
Rosie, I'll ask you the next question. There's a few questions about, what kind of things do you ask? What are some question frames that you use with students in these circles?
In the circles or the restorative calming space?
Well, that's a good question. Let's start with circles, and then maybe we'll do another round about those special spaces, because I know Lisa had also some comments to make on that.
Okay. So just like Kim pointed out, proactive circles, a community building, getting to know each other, those low risk questions are really important, especially at the beginning of the school year. And so the more you can do those, and I mean every day, if you can do it every day, the better, because then kids can feel safe with each other to take risks, like make a mistake, right? And because you have to make mistakes in order to learn. And so there's so much, so many resources out there for those kinds of low risk community building prompts. There's the harmony cards, which, ask questions like, what if you could be a superhero, what would it be, right? Or yesterday I asked the kids in the 6th grade class, because this was their first time in a circle, and when it's the first time and they're seeing each other, they're like, they giggle, like they're sometimes deal with their discomfort in inappropriate ways, but I know that it was discomfort. And so I just started with something really low risk. What's your favorite snack or dessert? So those proactive and doing them, like Kim says, 80% of your time prevents you from having to do harm circles because they're connected with each other. And then I also use prompts depending on if there's a problem that's brewing, and I want to make sure that I get all the students' voices in the matter. And so again, with yesterday's example, there's been some issues in the 6th grade class. And so I ask them to generally first talk about, there was a non-sequential go around prompt about what do you appreciate and like about this class? And then the next question was also non-sequential. What makes it hard to focus in here lately? And why? And I said, we don't want to mention names specifically. So if you would like to use this sentence frame, and I said, when blank happens, I feel blank because blank. And I wrote it on the board, and I saw kids kind of referring to it. And they were able to say, well, when certain people chase each other around the room, it gives me a headache and I feel like I can't think. Like they were really specific, and that sentence frame really helped. All the other kids were really like, whoa, you could see on their faces, I didn't realize that they're learning their impact on each other, but it's their voice about it. So I hope that answers that part.
Yeah. There's a few questions kind of interrelated. Somebody's asking, high school students, maybe it's harder to engage them with some of these circles. Also, what if there's resistance teachers to doing circles? How do you address this kind of resistances? I'm sure it happens in elementary age too. Or if you're trying to encourage other staff to be doing this and helping in their schools, what kind of ideas do you have to break down some of the resistances that people might have? Kim, do you want to take this one first?
Certainly I will. Resistant students, I just tell them that, it's important to me. Again, starting that year off talking about effective language and really getting them to be able to speak to me. And I tell them right from the get-go, I am not perfect. I don't pretend to be perfect. And I need for you guys, I trust that you're going to be honest with me and that you're not going to be hurtful to me, but we can be honest with one another. And I am amazed every time that it works because they can see that I'm being truthful with them. So their honesty, I really appreciate. And I said, you can call me out on things in a respectful manner. And we talk about what that looks like and how that feels. And, if something isn't respectful, then I will talk to them about it. And so those exchanges are wonderful. That being said, I tell them that, it's important to me. I would really like for everybody to join in the circle. They also know that if they choose to sit down, I'm not going to embarrass them and call them out. I'm going to let them have their space. I've had recently this past week a student that she loves to draw. She's consumed by it. She sits at her desk and I can tell she's listening. She'll pick her head up every once in a while. This week, I was just so surprised and so happy. She got up and joined the circle. She wasn't right away, but by the time the talking piece came around to where she was at, she stood up, she said her answer, and then she sat back down. So I know that we're making progress. And I didn't call it out in front of the group, but I said something to her on the side later and just said, I really appreciated that. Thank you for participating today. And she just smiled and that was it. It was simple. As far as with other staff, I've had success with other teachers that would come into my space, just inviting them. Or if they go sit down, I remind the group of what we're doing. And so then when it comes to where that teacher's at, I remind the students, oh, don't forget, this teacher that just entered our space as well. And so that teacher automatically jumps in. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot of influence in what goes on in other teachers' classrooms, just being a classroom teacher, but sharing my successes, I do believe does have an impact.
Thank you. Any thoughts, Rosie or Lisa, about students who might be resistant or staff?
I had a student resistant not too long ago. And it started with the student not being in a good mood. But although the student was not in a good mood, it doesn't mean he was engaging. He was still participating in the program. And it came to a point where he was breaking the norms, and I confronted him. And he broke a norm. He broke another norm, and I called the circle. And he was reluctant to come into the circle, so I called a school circle. I called a community circle. And the community came to support, and he was just reluctant to be part of the community, part of the circle. And so I began to share what led to the circle being called to discuss the behavior that he was being confronted on. And when that took place, the peers and the staff were supporting him, like, come on into the circle, participate in the circle. He didn't want to do it. And I just politely said to him, I said, listen, if you come to school and you're not in a good mood, it's okay. If you're not feeling your best, that is okay. If you don't want to be a part of the community, that's okay as well. But what's not okay is you disrespecting others and disrespecting the program. That is not okay to break the norms. So I gave him a choice where he was able to go to the reflection room and take time to himself, process what he was feeling and thinking, do some reflection, or he can join the circle. And he chose to go in the reflection room. And when he went to the reflection room, he was there for a little bit for a time to himself. And then his counselor went and talked with him. They shared. And after they had their discussion, the counselor came and talked to me, gave me a little bit of insight of what was going on. They welcomed me to come to the reflection circle to talk because he wanted to repair the harm with me. So we sat, we talked, and our relationship was restored. He thought it was a miscommunication where he thought I assumed he was in a different mood. Like, I didn't know. I did not know his mood where he didn't want to be bothered or talked to because he was engaging with staff and peers throughout the day. I just didn't know. So I apologized. I said, listen, I'm sorry for the miscommunication. I missed the mark. But for future references, how could I know? How can the community know when you're not in a good space, when you want to be by yourself because you want to have some time to yourself? What is it that you can tell us so we would know how to see and give you that time, have that space? And he didn't have an answer. So I waited and I said, I made a suggestion to him. I said, when you come to school and you're not feeling good, or you don't feel your best, you're not your bubbly, cheerful self that we see you as being, and it's okay, let us know that you need self-care. And when you need self-care, you say, I just need self-care. You will go to the reflection room, have that time to yourself, that space of quietness. You get to reflect, think whatever you would like to do in that moment. And when you're ready to be a part of the community, get with a peer, get with a staff, and let them know that you're ready to be a part of the community. So he agreed. Then we took that conversation to the whole community because he wanted to repair the harm that he created to the community when he was defiant and disrespectful, just being challenging. He wanted to take care of those things. And we gave him that opportunity. And when he had that opportunity and he shared, the staff and peers both let him know, you're forgiven, and they shared their affect statements, how they felt when he was behaving the way he was behaving. He took total ownership. He never made any excuses. Again, he apologized. When that process finished, I decided to share a little bit share with the community about our conversation and introducing the self-care. He agreed that when he comes to school and he's not feeling his best, he can say, hey, I need self-care, and be in the reflection room. And when he's ready to be with the community, he'll talk with a peer and or staff and move forward. However, I also suggested to the community, if you see not only him, but someone else are in a space and they're just not themselves, and you think self-care would be a good thing for them, offer it to them, suggest to them, hey, do you need self-care? And it's okay. It is okay to not feel okay. It is okay to have those moods where you don't want to feel bothered. It is okay. And when I talked with the student afterwards, because the whole community were in agreement, when I shared with him, I talked to him one-on-one and asked him, how did he feel when I presented to him that you can now have a space of self-care, that it's okay to come to school and feel the way you feel? What did it mean to you when I said that to you? And he said, it felt good because I know I have space. I can have space to myself. And that made me feel good, that he felt good to know that he could come to school. It's okay not to be in a great mood. It's okay not to be bubbly, and not being okay is okay, but I have a space that I can go to, and my staff supports me. And when I'm ready to come out, I can talk to a staff and or peer and participate in the community when I'm ready. So that made me feel good.
Thank you, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
Rosie, maybe this is a good moment to share some of what happens in your reflection room and or corner, and some of the questions that you ask.
Sure. So I will share links to the restorative calming space overview and my time away cool off card that I use. So when kids go to the restorative calming space in the classroom, there's a cool off card that they need to fill out as a way to hold them accountable for what they did in that space. And they always choose to go there, and it's for 3 to 5 minutes. I've never had students kind of take advantage of it because I'm clear with my expectations, what it's for, and that, you know, we really want you to be back into our community once you're feeling more regulated. And so on the Cool Now card, it says something to the effect, how are you feeling? Why is it that you need a time away? And then it has choices about what you did. So they can check, I use a mindfulness strategy. I'm over it now, because sometimes they just, right? Or I want to fill out reflection, a restorative reflection sheet. And that there's so many on the internet, by the way, the restorative reflection sheets, but I use the restorative questions, which is what happened? What were you thinking and feeling at the time? How were you affected? How were other people affected? What do you think needs to happen to make things right? And then they take that and they put it in the box on my desk. And then it means that they're requesting a harm circle. And actually, I just thought of a refinement for it. It could be at the bottom. It was there, you know, maybe now that I got this out, I'm actually over it, or I still need a harm circle. So that's the procedure I use for the restorative calming space. I do want to caution, when you go on the internet to look at different restorative reflection sheets or cards, that they're not all restorative. I've seen some that say, what poor choice did you make? What are you going to do to correct that? You know, it's, I get if they made a poor choice, but that, you know, it's, it's meant to be restorative and for them to encourage to reflect on their own, what impact did I have when I did that thing? So it can't just be for kids who caused harm. It has to also be for kids that were harmed. And for those that caused harm, we don't want to escalate them and get their amygdalas hijacked even more. We want them to come out of their downstairs brain and up into their upstairs brain faster, so they can become regulated, and then they're able to talk about the choices they made.
Kim, do you want to add anything?
I just love it. I'm so glad that she brought that up, because yeah, there sadly are way too many things that would not be restorative in nature that are out there. So, I mean, yeah, not to plug IRP, but that's the materials that I stick to, because that's what works. That's the success that I see. And that's, you know, what I strongly stand behind as well.
Okay, somebody brings something up in a circle that's shocking, surprising. What do you do? How do you handle that?
I'm trying to take my think time right now too. And that's usually if something would come up that's bizarre or odd, I take a moment to decide. And sometimes we have gone ahead and I said, okay, wasn't the direction I was going. Let's go ahead and talk about what was just said. I've done that with language that's been stated before that was inappropriate. And so, okay, you know what, we need to go back and let's just do a quick non-sequential about what's appropriate and inappropriate. Or let's talk about what our expectations were. How are we not meeting them? Or if it is something that is completely off topic, but I do see value in, I'll touch base with that student. And I'll say, you know, right now we're focused on this question. We'll get back to that, or I really do want to talk about that at a different time. There's time and place for everything. This isn't the time and place for this. And then have a conversation with that student, and I incorporate that right into where it needs to be the next day, or, you know, have a different circle when we can.
I will agree. I would say, depending on the topic, you know, if it's bizarre, it's bizarre, but there's sometimes it may feel or seem bizarre because the way it is expressed. And I would direct the conversation to a more appropriate way of expressing it for a discussion if it's, you know, if it deems to be discussed in the circle. However, if it's something personal and the student makes a outburst, then that's something that we would direct it to a one-on-one talk with the counselor or with myself, whatever that student may need at that time.
And then what do you say to the rest of the students who are left there? Yeah, this-
We'll address it. We'll tell the student, like, this conversation right now is not appropriate, and it's not the time, and it's not appropriate for this circle. However, we do offer the peers to support their peer. So if the peer is removed from the circle and given a one-on-one, he or she is asked, would they like support from a peer? And the students are also informed, who are left in the community, that, you know, your friend you may see your friend not in a good space, or your peer may be hurting, going through something, or you may know something that we don't know. We would like for you to talk to us. But it's the way you do it. So we would encourage them, if you want to offer peer support, you know, let the counselor know, and then we would have it in a way that they can talk in a safe place. Because, you know, with young people, a lot's going on, you know, and we want to make sure they're safe. But in the nature of the circle, if it's not appropriate, we remove that conversation and take it where it is appropriate, so that can be addressed.
Thank you. So we have about 10 minutes to go. We're going to keep answering your questions right up until 2 o'clock. Thank you all for attending and joining this. If you want to learn more, the IRP Graduate School offers a Master of Science in Restorative Practices, Graduate Certificate in Restorative Practices, many professional development events, and other services, coaching for schools. So please come to our website, iirp.edu, to learn more about all that. Rosie, I have a question I think could be directed to you. Someone's asking about younger kids, K2, K-2, behavioral strategies for forming circles. She says, these students have delayed social skills, and circle time is like the tail wagging the dog. Any strategies that could be helpful, time length, etc.?
So I have a site that said all of my classrooms are doing circles except for kindergarten. They're having a hard time. And so my you know, in the past, kind of circle time is you know, common in kindergarten. And so I think when people think restorative circles, they think it's something different than that, but that those traditional circles are still circles. I think keeping the length of time short, even with upper graders, when, you know, really being specific about the way they're going to respond. So this is a 30-second response. I want a one-word response. I want a phrase, and being explicit about that. Or even yesterday, a reminder, sometimes we get excited about what we're sharing. And so I'm going to show you my hand, and it just means as you see it counting down, I'm encouraging you to wrap up. I'm not trying to hurry you up, but you know, we want everyone to have equity of voice. And so I think the one-word responses are helpful in keeping the time limit down, because even upper graders, they get like, right, you know, in their seats, antsy, because when the circle lasts too long. Anytime you can do, as Kim suggested, the stand up, especially for younger grades, I think that's awesome. I did one not yesterday, but I did one with adults at the beginning of the year called "Have You Ever?" And we stood outside, and it was, and for kids, it might be like, "Have you ever been to a different school than this one?" And then they step in, and then they step out. In non-COVID times, they could actually step in and high five each other, but to mitigate that, we step in and just pretend to high five each other. So for kindergarten, it might be if, how many of you have you ever tried riding a bike? And then they could step in and step out. And you know, something that would, whatever their interests are, and you need to think about, how am I gonna figure out what their interests are, and then use those as your community building prompts.
That's great. We have a question. How does your physical classroom setup facilitate or impair restorative and social emotional teaching and learning? Kim, you want to start, since you're the explicitly classroom teacher, but I'm sure
Yes.
CN and Lisa also have thoughts.
Okay, so how is the question worded?
How does your physical setup of your space, is that important for, you know, does that facilitate or impair restorative and social emotional teaching and learning?
Okay, fantastic. I change things a lot. The kids and I have talked about it, and they have expressed frustration, honestly, about me changing their seats, about me changing the setup of the room. We started the year in groups of 4. I then moved them to groups of 2. We then went to rows. Then we went back to groups of, I think, 3. Right now they're in rows again. And I told them it is for specific reasons. I won't always like justify what I'm doing or why, but I will let you know. Like if we're having, we had a test, and the last test they were too chatty in their groups. So I put them in rows, and then, okay, now let's talk about it and what kind of groups do we need to be in? Depending on, maybe it is for social emotional purposes, that I know some backgrounds and stuff, and I want them in specific groups. I will group them based on, some NWA scores. Maybe I am doing a mixed group of, higher level, lower level learning based on data. Most of my grouping is based on data. And then the other half that I always take into consideration is behaviors. Who do I know is going to be successful? If I know that we're going to do a lesson that they really need to talk to one another, I will put them with people that I know they will talk to. And then it is just me facilitating those groups so that they stay on task. But if it's something that they need to focus and it's more complicated, then I'm going to group them a different way. So like I said, they do get frustrated that I rearrange the classroom, yet they also know maybe that means we're going to do a different type of activity. So hopefully that helped.
Any other thoughts? Okay. So getting a few questions, Rosie, maybe you can address SEL skills. There's a couple specific questions about SEL skills for teachers to use for themselves, or strategies. I don't know that you would have for incarcerated students, but yeah, anyway, strategies, social emotional learning that teachers can use.
That's a really important question, because a lot of my work is in supporting transformative SEL for adults. And so, if we can have administrators and central office leaders use restorative practices with their staff or other adults, then you're doing with them, and you get to experience what being in a restorative community feels like. And if there are some principles, well, actually there's more than just some principles that are in our district that do use staff check-in circles and community building circles to build that cohesion and support communication and collaboration with staff, just like you would do in the classroom, the community building circles. And I think it's important for adults to be reflective and think about their self. So the CASEL 5, right? The SEL competencies, self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And so there are some questions that, we can ask ourselves. What am I doing to elevate the voices of my students in my classroom? How am I affirming their identity? All of these tap into your own adult SEL skills. Also, when you take a pause, when you're about to escalate in response to a child being escalated, you can pause yourself, and using affective statements can help de-escalate yourself and the student, so that you can respond more responsively versus reactively. So knowing, having that adult self-care time. There's an app that I do, and it asks me, how am I feeling? And I have to think about how I'm feeling and use specific words for it, like overwhelmed, frustrated, not just happy or sad, So if we can practice increasing our own emotional vocabulary, and then, that shows up in our affective statements, that helps us manage ourselves, because, you know, and thinking about things that come up in a circle that you're like, whoa, that I can't believe that just happened. Your reaction is so important. So I have a little anecdote in my 4th grade class a couple of years ago. Someone was sharing that they just got baptized that weekend. And my little Reuben, he said, what the, like he actually used the F word, is that, and he looked at, so all the kids went, all the kids looked at me, and then he felt all the eyes on him, and I just thought, he already is embarrassed and can't believe that he did that. So I'm not gonna go, that's inappropriate, how dare you do that, get out of the circle, right? So I just said, I looked at him and I said, what are you needing right now, Reuben? He says, I need a time away. I go, please go to the calming corner, come back when you're ready. And then I talked to him afterwards about, you know, what do you think the impact about that was? And then he said, I should probably go apologize to James. And so he did. But if had I reacted differently, and believe you me, I did react punitively in other ways with Reuben actions in the past. But you just reflect. And so the SEL skills, I think is the most important. Reflect every day. What was my self-awareness like as an adult? How did I respond to my kids? What was awesome about what I did today? What could I do better? Because I want to have a growth mindset as an adult too. And what bias showed up for me today? I'm on a journey of looking at my if I'm anti-racist or not, and what ways have I been affected by my assimilation into this country, and you know, so those things come out of my blind spots, and they go, whoa, I didn't know that I did that with girls and not boys, that I did that with my students of color, and I didn't mean to, but I see that I did, and I need to hold myself accountable for that, and I need to do better.
Thank you. We are fresh out of time, but I think that's a nice note to end on. I want to encourage all you teachers and educators to work together and reflect. And I think that's one of the strongest ways to make these changes happen. So I want to thank our panelists, Rosie Arcona, Kim Jones, Lisa Cofield. I want to thank Pam Thompson was helping out, lecturer who was helping out in the chat room. And please get in touch, go to the irp.edu, go to the contact page. Somebody will get back to you about all the questions that didn't get answered today and ways that we might be able to help you. So thank you everyone once again, and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Thank you.